Good morning, everyone. My name is Beatriz. I'm from Bind Tuning, so one of those theme sellers that you just saw a couple of minutes ago. So we actually have been selling themes for Orchard for a couple of years. From the moment that Orchard was publicly shown to the market back in 2011 in Mix in Las Vegas. And I'll be talking about responsive design today and a little bit for Orchard. And you're all wondering what this is, right? So recently in architecture, a new concept is starting to arise, which is called responsive architecture. And it is all related to buildings that actually adjust and adapt, walls that adjust to the presence of people. And this concept is pretty similar to responsive design. This was yesterday's web, so the web that we knew. It was static, predictable. We all knew what we were expecting when developing a website. And this is today's web, right? Lots of different devices, lots of different screen sizes, lots of different features. And the websites that we design have to deal with all of this. So we have to be ready and prepared for all of this. And that's where responsive design actually comes in. And it's a really simple concept. So it's all about how our website adapts and adjusts based on one thing, that is the size of the screen. And responsive design has essentially four different areas: grids, flexible media, media queries, and responsive navigation. And I'll be going through these four and trying to explain what we have to have in mind when developing a theme for responsive design. So when we develop a website, basically we can think of the website in different areas, right? And this is our grid. So this is not a new concept. Everyone knows what this is. Typically, a very common grid is the 12-column grid because it allows us to divide it in a lot of different combinations. And when grids started to show up, some years ago, they were pretty much static grids. So the 960 grid was probably one of the first that started to appear a long time ago. And it was based on fixed width columns. So these were the initial static grids that we used. Right now, and when we talk about responsive design, if we want our content to adjust to different screen sizes, we have to make sure that these columns actually are flexible. And the way to do it is relatively simple. So it's all about implementing colors with percentage widths. And I don't know if you can see the numbers, I believe so. So this is a sample from Bootstrap. Who's using Bootstrap in the room? Okay, so over 50%. And it's pretty simple. So it all has to do with using rows. And inside each row, we are actually defining columns. And all of these are flexible in terms of layouts. I'm going to quickly show you how we can do this in Orchard. And for this, I have a sample website. It's the wildlife all about butterflies. Let me just show you very quickly. So I'm just going to show you inside Orchard just to make it simple. This is a very basic theme. So it only has one layout. It's layout. It's the layout. In terms of the definition, it's a simple theme. We have a container here. We have navigation, a header that shows the logo, a content area, so with some zones, and then the footer. If some of you want to see this in your phones, you can do it. So it's orchard.bind.pt. Currently, this website is non-responsive, right? So it means that I have a few columns of content, and it just does not adapt. So if some of you want to start grabbing your websites and converting them to responsive, it's not that hard. So first thing we're going to do is, so I'm not going to write code, okay? I brought the code. I'm just going to uncomment it just to make it faster because I don't have all that much time. So first thing that you have to make sure of is that you have the viewport defined, okay, in the head section of your theme. And right now, this demo is all based on Twitter Bootstrap because it's the tool that it's most commonly used nowadays, and it's the one that we use. And to make the columns flexible, so to apply that flexible grid, actually here on the area that designs the zones, you see that we have 2 rows, and inside each row we have the zones with special classes. So if I want one class that spans the entire width of the screen, I have a 12-column grid, so I have this span 12. And to have the 3 different columns, I say, okay, I want one that spans 4 columns, another that spans another 4, and another 4. So we have basically the zones spanning these different columns. So let me just save this just to make sure that I have the viewport ready. And then you will see that in terms of CSS, it's a very, very simple CSS file. Currently, it's importing the Bootstrap, only the Bootstrap, the regular styles, and this does not import the responsiveness of it, okay? So I can use Bootstrap with or without responsive. If I only call this file, I will have basic Bootstrap files that will help me design buttons, forms, tables, etc. But if I uncomment this line, which calls the Bootstrap responsive CSS file, and by using those special classes, those spans and that row, you will see that if I reload the website, and if you see these columns here, actually, right now, I do have a responsive grid, right? So when I resize my browser, those columns will stack up. So getting a responsive grid is just as simple as this, okay? If you're using one of these platforms, Bootstrap or some other platform, it's as easy as using like basic classes and actually importing one CSS file. So this is just it. So we've talked about the grid, and there are a lot of grid systems that you can use nowadays. So YUI grid is probably, just in terms of grid, and I'm talking specifically about grids, so not frameworks, full frameworks. In terms of grid systems, YUI grid is probably the most used grid system. It's been here for a while, so it's developed by Yahoo. It's so simple. I don't really like it personally because the classes are so simplistic that for me it's sometimes hard to understand the use of it, so that they're not very self-explanatory, but it's widely used. You have the golden grid system, which is also it's a very used grid system nowadays. The simple grid, and this is a very basic grid system with only 6 columns. So for simple projects, small projects, this is one that is very, very, very simple to use. And the 1140 grid, and this was probably the first responsive grid to come out to the market, if not the first, one of the first. But for a website to be responsive, grids are just not enough. right? So in the demo, you saw that, okay, I have my columns now, they stack up, but there is a lot of other content that just didn't adjust. And one very important thing is actually flexible media. So when we're talking about images, videos, and other sort of media, we also need that to be responsive. So if I go back here and resize the browser, you see, for example, these images. As I'm resizing, they're not adjusting, right? And actually, they're overlapping each other. So I just don't want this to happen. And the concept behind responsible media is actually really, really simple. So if you want to have responsible media in your website, it's just as simple as adding the CSS line. Okay? So there's no more than this in terms of images. And we can do that just very quickly. So if we go back to the CSS, if I uncomment this line, which actually just does that, let me save. Let us reload. And hope that internet connection is still on. Okay, I'll come back in 1 minute to see if it loaded. Okay, just not to stop. But resizing the images is probably just not enough. Because when you think that you have like a small device with probably a lower internet connection, and when we start developing, we typically develop for the desktop, right? So we think of like a large image, a large banner in the home page, and probably it's an image that is heavy in terms of loading. When we have this small screen and a slower internet connection, we probably don't want to load the same image, but just resized, right? It just doesn't make sense. And to face this, nowadays a lot of initiatives are just starting to show up that actually allow us to think of this differently. This tool, which is called Adaptive Images, was developed by Matt Wilcox, and actually what it does is it detects the client's browser size. It will cache the images on the server, create different sized images, and then based on the screen size, it will deliver a different sized image, which means that if you are browsing on a mobile phone that is 320 pixels wide, you won't be loading the same image as if you were on a desktop. Okay, so if you're using this kind of scripts, actually, you will get different sized images depending on the screen, and this will allow a faster loading time. Okay. Sencha, which is another framework, also does the same. So if you see that little image there, so it saves automatically without you having to do anything. So you only create one image, and it saves a lot of different sized images that will be loaded depending on the client's size. But images are just not the only concern that we have. So text is also another concern. When you start developing a website, and think of it for the desktop once again, probably when you design your headings, H1, for example, you will create it based on a large font, right? Probably nowadays, large fonts are very popular, so we like big, bold fonts. And if we do nothing, although the grid is responsive and we have a lot of responsive styles, if we do nothing, that same size of font will be displayed on the little screen. We can do one thing, which is we can manually define what we want to happen. So we can define, all right, for this size and that size and that size, I want the H1 to be 18 pixels, 24 pixels, and then 60 pixels. But that's manual work, right? You would have to actually manually define the behavior for every tag, for every heading tags, for text, everything. And that's where scripts like this come to the game. So FitText actually dynamically will adjust your text depending on the size of the window. And let's see, okay. All right, so this one is reloaded. Let me just show you the images. So probably didn't save. Okay, probably not saving. I'll come back to this. Let me just show you FitText. So FitText is a script that actually adjusts the size of the text based on the size of the screen. So, and you see that it dynamically does it, okay? And we have to do nothing. So it's just including the script, and you're pretty much done. And there is another one, which is SlabText, and this is very interesting, this tool. It allows you to do pretty much the same thing, but for blocks of text. And I tried to load SlabText a while ago, and it was not loading, but just to show you the demo. But if you have the time just to check it out later, you will see that the entire block of text, as you resize the window, it always looks nice. So it does not only change the size of the font, but it makes sure that that block always looks good. So the place of the words inside the block, and Rita mentions it in a very, very nice way. So to make bold headings, this is a very interesting tool. But one other major concern are tables. And typically when we think of responsive design, if we have some tables in our content, we think, okay, so everything will adjust, but what about tabled content? And this food table is one initiative that actually also helps us achieve flexible tables. The link that I will be sharing with you in the PowerPoint goes to this tutorial, so not directly to the demo, because I think this is the tutorial is better than the website explaining how to use FitText. And let me just show you quickly the demo. So this is tabled content. Unfortunately, you cannot see the full table because the resolution of the screen is small, but you will see that if oh my God, it's just going to the side. I don't know why it's not, oh man. Okay, I'm sorry. It does work, trust me. I don't know why it's not working right now. Okay, you can see here what it will do in smaller screens. See this plus here? So what it does is, it detects the size of the screen, and for the extra columns that it cannot display, it will just stack them up inside this extra information, okay? And for each extra column, it creates one line. So, for example, for this table, we would have 2 more columns, so the job title and the date of birth, okay? Honestly, I have no idea if it's for the fact that we're just projecting, but if you have the chance to test it in your computer, you will see that it does work, trust me. This one? Oh yeah, but it did work, just resizing the browser, because I did test it at home, so. Okay, but see how it works? Oh, right, you're right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Antoine. Okay, so now you see. This is a very, very handy tool, believe me. I'm not sure how many of you actually use tables inside, so in your websites or to display some sort of information. But when we're talking about some kind of management, admin websites where you have a lot of tabled content to display, this is like a huge concern, and this sort of tools is really, really helpful. Okay, so we talked about images, text, tables. And none of this would be possible without something that is probably very well known to most of you, which are media queries. Media queries are a CSS3 feature, but they were based on CSS2 media types. So back in CSS2, we have this way of saying, okay, I want to load a screen CSS or another CSS. And actually, right now, what we can do is do that based on the size of the screen. Just to show you a nice use of media queries, let me go back to the website and try to understand if this is saving, because I'm getting worried. Okay. I hope not. It's not saving. Let's do this again. Okay. Because, yeah, now that it reloaded, okay, I did uncomment, but probably didn't save. Let's save it again. Okay. So now you see that the image is resized. So this was like the previous demo. Okay, but just to show how to use the media queries, and this is something that you can easily do in your websites. The way that this logo is showing, so this is the logo, this big logo that when we resize, it's still very big, right? So this is not the way that I want to show you. And the way that the logo is being implemented, it's as a background image. So this is like something typical to do. And what actually can be done in responsive websites is something like, okay, I want to define it for a maximum width of 979 pixels. I want to load a different background image. So I'm loading the small version of the logo. So, and this is something that you can easily do, okay? And define that for desktop versions, you have like this nice logo that actually occupies a large part of the screen. But when you're loading it in small devices, the logo typically has to be very small, okay? You don't want to take a lot of space in the top part of your website because you want users to jump to content very, very fast. Okay, and yep. Oh, you can go on.
I was wondering if it still loads the other image and doesn't show in that case. Does it still load?
No, in that case, no, because you're just replacing the CSS that CSS line. Okay, so in that case, it's only loading the small image. If we were using just another technique, like, for example, resizing, yes, it will be loading the same image, but in that case, no, it's not loading. So we've seen the grids, how to apply flexible media queries, and now let's talk a little bit about responsive navigation. And there are a lot of approaches that you can take to implement responsive navigation. One of them is actually doing nothing, right? Probably the most used approach of all, doing nothing. And in cases like this, it doesn't look so bad, right? Actually, it does look good. So you have the navigation on this side, and on that side, it's not that bad. But in some cases, it's really bad. So cases like this one, where you have a lot of items, where items are stacking over each other. Our fingers are not pixel pointers, right? So they're large. Some people have larger fingers. Stuff like this, easily you would touch a different button. This is not nice visually, so doing nothing is typically just not an option. So, first approach, which is the footer anchor. This is an approach that can be used when you have footer navigation, and it sometimes happens, okay? In some websites with footer navigation only, what can be done is, I don't know if you can see because it's kind of dark, but okay, on this side there is a footer navigation. On that side, you will see that at the bottom there are links, and at the top there is a small link saying menu. The footer anchor technique, it's very simple to implement. It requires no JavaScript, so it's just placing a link on the top of your website that actually has an internal link in the page and that makes the user jump from the top to the bottom navigation. Although this is very simple to implement, because you're just actually implementing a link, an anchor, so it's easy, it might be very confusing. Okay, because the user navigating in the small screen, he touches a link on the top and is like rapidly taken to the bottom and, you know, like content just scrolling fast. So it might be confusing. Although it's easy to implement, it's not very elegant approach. The select menu. The select menu is actually the approach that we at BindTuning use for our themes. So the concept is, let's grab the navigation, and you see it on that side, and let's convert each navigation item into a select element item. Okay? When you look at this like this, so it requires very easy, JavaScript is simple to implement, so this is not a very complicated approach. But when you look at it just in this way, you might think, okay, this is not elegant too, right? So we have the select on the top. Users might look at that and think, oh, it just doesn't feel like navigation visually. But the way that we're implementing is slightly different. So besides of the select element that you see there, so we're generating it based on navigation items, we also inject an extra element, which is a span. And that span overlaps the select, and what users actually see is the span element. So inside the span element, we format it the way we want it. We can put images, we can put text inside the span, and the select is underneath it. So when the user clicks the span, the select opens, and it's an integrated navigation to the phone. So this is like an example of what we do. If you see on top where it says home and it has a little icon, so what you see there is a span element. We inject some text with the title of the page that the user is actually on at the moment. And when the user clicks the menu, this navigation opens, and the navigation is integrated to the phone's way of working. So that is why we actually like this approach very much, because it uses the way of the phone itself, right? So it's very integrated with the phone. Another approach is the toggle. This is a very elegant approach. Probably it's very common. I'll be showing this on the demo, how to implement a toggle. And the toggle is simple, right? So you click an icon, and it just slides down the navigation. The problem with the toggle is that if you have navigation with a lot of items, and with a hierarchical structure, so if you have items, sub-items, or sub-items, it might not look that good. You would have to scroll down a lot to navigate through all the items. And easily, a website can get to dozens of navigation items. So that's the only issue with the toggle. So the JavaScript is not that hard to implement. If you use one of the platforms like Bootstrap, it's like really, really simple. But it might get confusing to use when you have a lot of navigation items. But if you have few navigation items, well, this is a very, very elegant approach. Then the left nav flyout, and this is a very complicated one to implement. This is probably introduced by Facebook, I think. If you all use Facebook on the phone, you will know this way of navigating, right? When you click on the menu icon, and then suddenly the navigation flows from the left. I have to say that personally, I find it a little complicated to get used to. When I started using Facebook, it felt weird. Just clicking the icon, and it got me confused. All of a sudden, some stuff came from the left, so I didn't know where the website was. I think this is one of the most confusing ways of mobile navigation. But it can be really pretty. So because you have so much control over the area that flows from the left, if you want to make it really nice and have a lot of formatting, this can be a nice approach, okay? Although it requires a lot of JavaScript. Just coming a little further back to the footer anchor, if you want to make it really, really simple, and use the footer navigation. If you have footer navigation, you can have the footer only, which is actually, you don't have to do anything on top, just keep your navigation on the bottom, and practically only adjust the CSS. So, I don't know if you see it, probably don't see it's too dark, but actually it's just keeping the footer navigation and formatting the CSS. And the last option is, okay, hide it and cry, which means say, oh, mobile users don't need navigation. Okay, so let's go to the demo. The website currently is displaying demo this way. Okay, so we're doing nothing, but this is just not acceptable, right? So stacking elements, it just doesn't look good. If you're using a platform like Bootstrap, you have a lot of stuff. In this case, it's like really, really simple to implement the toggle. The toggle is just as easy as this button element that is here that I'm uncommenting actually displays the icon. Okay, so this is the icon that I want to be displayed when on a mobile device. And then I just have to add simple classes. Let me see, okay, to my navigation element. And everything that is inside these classes will be hidden when the display is smaller than 940 pixels. Okay, let us save this. If we go back, you will see that now I have the toggle. On this case, what is happening is that inside the toggle, my styles are still like this. So what you can do is go to the CSS and define the way that you want navigation to display for those screen sizes. So just format it. Okay, say, okay, I don't want them to float left, I want them to block, to display blocked. And in this case, I'm just defining a little extra border on top just to separate the items. And if we go back, you will see that right now my navigation stacks up. Okay, so implementing a toggle is like really, really simple. It's no more than this. Okay. So we've seen all the elements that that define what responsive 5 minutes? What responsive navigation is. And all of this can be found in what are called the boilerplates, which are like frameworks that include all this. We have Twitter Bootstrap, so we've seen that a lot of you are using this. It's a very complete framework. It includes styles for pretty much doing everything. The problem with it, and I'm talking against myself because we're using Twitter Bootstrap, is that when you just grab the entire thing and put it in your website, you're loading a lot of stuff that you're just not going to use and that users won't probably need. So with all that JavaScript, with all those styles, the site just gets slower, right? So we're loading it with sometimes unnecessary stuff. So this is the only drawback, is that eventually you might be overloading your theme. Foundation 3, just one thing. Bootstrap is based on less. It has a less version. Anyone using the less version? Okay. So less is like empowered CSS, where you have variables, calculations, so a lot of stuff, which allows you to actually have very, very flexible CSS. And an alternative to less is Sass. So Foundation 3 is another boilerplate. This one is based on Sass. So if some of you prefer Sass over less, so this might be an option. I had to bring this one because this is a Portuguese one. It's very simple. It's called Ink. It looks nice. And this one is something really, really new. I don't know if any of you has heard of Pure. It has it's 2 weeks old, probably. It was really, you know it? No? Okay, this is released by Yahoo, so it's based on the YUI grid that I've shown previously. And Pure looks really nice, I have to say. The amazing thing about Pure is that it's only 5K large. So it's amazingly small. I have to show you. So it really looks nice. Okay, so it's pretty. It does have a lot of functionality and stuff, so it looks really good. And the 5K thing just makes me, it blows my mind. So I'm not lying. So see this line? That's where the size comes from. So you see 1K, the base, the grid, the size of the forms. So it's just this. It's amazing. When you think that Bootstrap is so large and it makes your theme so heavy sometimes, and Pure is so light. So definitely, if you do not have a need for a lot of functionality, and if you are just looking for a lightweight framework to make your website responsive, probably Pure is an amazing option, because in terms of size, it's just almost not possible. Let me just show you one small graphic, and this is from Google Trends. I don't know if you guys usually use Google Trends, but this is like the most amazing tool for you to understand where the market is going. And this just shows a comparison between the use of Twitter Bootstrap, YUI, and CSS grids in general. And I just brought this for you to see that, in fact, Twitter Bootstrap is currently probably the most used tool in the market. Okay, Pure just doesn't show, obviously, because it's so recent. But I have a feeling that it will also start growing. But currently, Bootstrap is in fact the tool. Okay, so we've been talking about what is responsive, but responsive has to be, in fact, a subset of something that is called adaptive. So we have to look a little further ahead. And adaptive design is all about thinking that, okay, we want the website to resize depending on the size of the screen, all that, but that's not enough. So we have to have concerns like, if my user is on a mobile device, his internet connection is slower. I don't want to load him with stuff that he just doesn't need. So I want to be very careful on the experience that the user is having and making that experience light and meaningful. So we just cannot load everything into a mobile website as if we were in a desktop site. And there are a few basic concepts about adaptive design. The first is ubiquity. And ubiquity means being at every place at the same time. And I've shown you this, right? So this is today's web. But we're not developing for today. We will have web-enabled TVs. We will have web-enabled fridges. We will have web-enabled cars. And we will have web-enabled, we don't know what, right? So we don't know what people will be buying in 2 years, what we will be buying for Christmas in 2 years, web-enabled watches maybe, right? And the websites that you are developing today have to be ready for those web-enabled devices. We don't know which devices, right? But we know that the sites that we develop today will still be used in 2 years' time. This is not a problem. So this is a major opportunity, which means that those of us that actually manage to keep up the pace will be the ones that will make the most amazing websites in 2 years, in a year time, okay? Performance, and this has all to do with that packaging. It's a fact that 71% of mobile users, they expect their mobile website to load as fast, if not faster, than the desktop website. And 74% of those users will actually abandon the site if it doesn't load in 5 seconds. So they're just willing to wait 5 seconds for their website to load on their phone. The problem is that average page size is 1 megabyte, and this is not much. Okay, we're talking about their websites where the home page is 50 megabytes. So you cannot expect those users to actually wait for your website to load on a mobile device. And now the most important thing is that next year will be the turning point year. It's the first year where mobile access will actually be more important, and you will have more mobile accesses than desktop users. So we're talking about a complete shift on web usage. From the next year on, you'll have more mobile users than desktop users. So our way of developing definitely has to change. So we have to think mobile. We still have to think about enhancement, which means that one size just does not fit all. If you had, what I'm going to show is not my idea, so this was someone else's metaphor. But if I told each one of you, okay, guys, I'm offering you a trip. You just don't know where to. Okay, so pack your bag. And what would you do? You would pack your ski material because you could go to Austria, and you would pack your slips because you could go to a nice beach in the Caribbean. So you would pack pretty much everything, right? Because you wouldn't know where you'd be going. And this is what we're doing right now with responsive. We're just packing everything. And this is just not the way of doing it, okay? So we have to start thinking adaptive. We have to start thinking of ways of delivering the right content and the right experience to each type of user. And this is the way we have to do it in the future. We have to support as many devices as possible. but we have to optimize for the ones that care the most, okay? We all have to be conscious that we cannot support 100% of the users, okay? This is like a fact. And just make sure that 95% of your users definitely do have a very nice experience. And just to end, make sure that your website is future-friendly. Don't forget, you're developing a website not for today, not for today's gadgets, not for today's features. You're developing for tomorrow's. So our websites will be on in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years' time. So that's it for tomorrow. Pretty much this was it. Just go to bindtuning.com because, guys, if you're looking for orchard themes, just check out our website, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Bind Skins, and thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yep.
Try to use the mic a little bit also for the video. It helps a little bit.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wondered about FitText.
Yep.
Why would you use that over M's? What benefit?
Why you use that?
Yeah, over using an M, because obviously you know where an M is proportional to the screen.
Okay. If you have to actually test it to feel it. Okay. If you're developing your website and you want to have a very nice H1, so it's large, looks very good on your desktop screen, right? If you do nothing on your mobile phone, I guarantee you that heading will not fit in one line, okay? So it will break, it will look very, very large. So you would have to manually, if you don't use this kind of tool, you might not use it, but you just have to guarantee that you are defining the way that you want text to display in different screen sizes. Okay, so we do have that concern. So actually, for example, at Bind Tuning, we do not use FitText, just not to overload. We're using so many JS files that come from Bootstrap that we don't want to add any more JavaScript. But we're using media queries to actually do something very similar to what FitText does, which is you just have to have the concern to guarantee that when you're on a small device, headings look nice, text looks nice. Probably you're going to increase the size of paragraphs because on a desktop you would nicely have a 13 pixel font. But when you go to the mobile device, probably you want it to be 15 or 16 to increase readability. But you want headings to be smaller. So text is a major concern, just to guarantee that on a small device it's very readable. It's just a matter of usability.
Any other questions?
Hi. So at what point in time does, what kind of breaking changes are there to the responsive design? So can you do very different navigation on the mobile device compared to the navigation that you have on your desktop and still have one page surfing it all? Or is there some point in time that you say, okay, it's better now to make a separate page for your mobile device and a separate page for your desktop?
So you're talking about the decision of having responsive or the decision of having two separate websites. Is that it? Okay, that is not, there is not an easy answer for that, okay? And it will most likely depend on the website that you're developing. Note that for large companies, for example, probably responsive is just not an option, okay? Responsive is not, it's not the Holy Grail. It is it's a very interesting way of developing mobile websites when we're talking about limited budgets, when we're talking about we want the website to be developed fast. We don't have a lot of money to implement two different websites. We do not have a lot of money or time to maintain two separate websites, and that's when responsive comes to the game. large companies typically don't use responsive. So what they do is they want to pretty much control everything in the mobile experience. And if there is a budget, if there is time, so probably you will have 2 separate websites because you want to control the mobile experience so much that you just have to have a different website. But most likely, for most of us, that is just not an option because either we don't have the money or we don't have the time to do it. So that's when responsive comes to the game. Yep.
7% of the people of any language are dyslexic, and one of the ways you can serve them is by providing them with a font that helps them read text. Open Dyslexic is one such font. Do you know how, is it possible to serve web fonts within this framework?
Web fonts? Yes. So, for example, on the demo, I'm not using any web font. It's just a basic font. But yes, you can just use web fonts basically on everything. Is that the question?
Well, yes, but an awful lot of your talk was about positioning fonts, making sure that they look good. But when 7% of the people who are likely to visit the website are dyslexic and prefer a different font, how do you cope with that?
I don't understand. I'm sorry, but I don't understand how dyslexia has a. You're talking about dyslexia?
Dyslexia is that you can't read properly. Most children have problems reading, and it's also adults have problems reading.
Yes. Okay. I understand. So, and you're just suggesting that people might want to use a different font?
Yes.
Well, probably you would have to, in terms of the website, you would have to give them the ability to do so, right? And probably on runtime, say, okay, guys, select a different font, and web fonts probably are a good option to do that. And you can easily use this with web fonts. There is no. So it's not necessary for you to use web fonts to say, okay, I'm not using responsive, or I am. It has nothing to do with it, so you're cool with that.
Any other questions?
Last one.
For the toggle navigation, what did you use to implement that in the
Bootstrap.
example? Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Beatriz.
Okay.